When she removed her jacket, the tattoo on her arm left the courtroom in stunned silence. Justice Underarm's inscription and JAG Corps insignia. The judge recognized her. This woman was one of the most experienced experts in the military justice system. Which city in the world are you watching this video from today? If you enjoyed this story about those who served best in times past, please consider subscribing for more stories of unsung heroes. The Manhattan Criminal Court building on Center Street stood as a towering monument to justice in the heart of New York City's legal district. Its imposing limestone facade and classical architecture had witnessed countless legal proceedings over the decades, housing some of the city's most routine yet essential judicial functions. The building processed hundreds of minor criminal cases each week through its various courtrooms, handling the steady stream of misdemeanor offenses that formed the backbone of the urban criminal justice system. Judge William Harrison's courtroom on the third floor had become known throughout the legal community for its efficient handling of criminal cases and the judge's reputation for fairness in dealing with defendants from all walks of life. Harrison, a 58-year-old jurist with 23 years of experience on the bench, had seen virtually every type of criminal case and defendant that the city's diverse population could produce. His courtroom was a place where justice was administered with careful attention to both legal procedure and human dignity. The docket on this particular Tuesday morning in November included the usual array of minor criminal cases: petty theft, disorderly conduct, minor drug possession, and various fraud-related charges that represented the everyday challenges of urban law enforcement. Among these routine cases was People v. Rodriguez, a credit card fraud charge that appeared to be straightforward in its facts and likely resolution. Elena Rodriguez sat in the defendant's chair, facing charges that could result in significant fines and potential jail time. The prosecution alleged that she had used credit cards that didn't belong to her to make unauthorized purchases, totaling just under $3,000, at various retail establishments throughout Manhattan over a period of several weeks. The evidence seemed comprehensive. Security footage from multiple stores, purchase receipts bearing her signature, and witness statements from store employees who had processed the transactions. At 45 years old, Elena appeared to fit the profile that the case file suggested: an unemployed woman who had fallen on hard times and made poor financial decisions that had led to criminal charges. Her appearance was unremarkable: conservative clothing, minimal makeup, and a demeanor that suggested someone who was trying to navigate an unfamiliar and intimidating legal system. She had no obvious wealth, no apparent connections to the legal profession, and no indicators that she possessed the resources or knowledge necessary to mount an effective defense. The prosecution's case had been prepared with the efficiency that characterized routine criminal proceedings in the busy Manhattan court system. Assistant District Attorney Michael Chen had handled hundreds of similar cases and approached People Rodriguez with the same methodical preparation he brought to all credit card fraud prosecutions. The evidence was clear: the defendant appeared to lack the resources for sophisticated legal representation, and the case seemed destined for resolution through a plea bargain that would save everyone time and effort. Elena's court-appointed attorney, David Martinez, was a dedicated public defender who was unfortunately overwhelmed by his caseload of over 200 active cases. Martinez had spent less than 2 hours preparing for Elena's defense, reviewing the basic facts and advising her that accepting a plea bargain would be her best option given the strength of the prosecution's evidence. He had seen similar cases dozens of times and genuinely believed that negotiating a reduced sentence would serve Elena's interests better than risking a trial that she was unlikely to win. But Elena had surprised everyone by insisting on her right to a trial and indicating that she intended to represent herself in court. This decision had puzzled both her attorney and the court staff, as most defendants facing similar charges would have accepted the plea arrangement and moved on with their lives. Elena's determination to fight the charges suggested either unusual stubbornness or confidence in her ability to navigate the legal system that seemed inconsistent with her apparent background and circumstances. Judge Harrison had presided over criminal cases for 15 years before his current appointment, and he prided himself on his ability to read defendants and assess their likelihood of success in self-representation. Elena Rodriguez didn't fit the typical profile of someone who could effectively defend herself against criminal charges. She had no apparent legal training, no previous court experience, and was facing an organized prosecution with substantial evidence and professional legal expertise. What Judge Harrison, the prosecution, and everyone else in the courtroom didn't know was that Elena Rodriguez had spent 22 years in the United States Army, the last 18 as a judge advocate general officer specializing in military law, criminal defense, and legal proceedings in combat zones around the world. From 1995 to 2017, she had prosecuted and defended cases involving everything from minor disciplinary infractions to serious war crimes in some of the most challenging legal environments that existed anywhere in the world. Elena's expertise in military law was comprehensive and professionally developed through years of intensive training and practical experience. She held a law degree from Georgetown University Law Center, where she had graduated magna cum laude and served as an editor of the Law Review. Her military legal training included advanced certifications in criminal law, evidence procedure, and courtroom advocacy that had taken years to earn and maintain throughout her career. Her service record included assignments as defense counsel in high-profile military criminal cases, prosecutor in courts martial involving serious felonies, and senior legal counsel for major commands in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Germany. Elena had provided legal advice to commanders making life-and-death decisions in combat zones, investigated war crimes, and defended soldiers accused of offenses ranging from minor disciplinary violations to capital crimes. Elena's knowledge of criminal procedure, evidence law, and courtroom strategy was at the level of experienced civilian attorneys with decades of practice. But her experience had been gained in military legal settings where the stakes were often higher and the procedures more rigorous than those found in civilian courts. She had handled cases involving national security implications, international law, and complex jurisdictional issues that required expertise far beyond what most civilian attorneys ever encountered. Her transition to civilian life had been significantly more difficult than she had anticipated when she retired from the Army in 2017. Despite her impressive military record and legal expertise, Elena had struggled to find meaningful employment that utilized her specialized skills and experience. The civilian legal system was competitive and political in ways that made it difficult for military attorneys to transition their skills to private practice or public service. The challenges Elena faced in civilian employment were representative of broader issues affecting military veterans with specialized professional skills. Her military legal experience was extensive and impressive, but civilian employers often failed to understand how military expertise translated to civilian practice, or they were hesitant to hire veterans who might have difficulty adapting to civilian workplace cultures and expectations. Financial difficulties had accumulated over the months following Elena's retirement as she struggled to find stable employment that provided adequate compensation for her qualifications and experience. She had taken temporary work in retail and service industries while continuing to search for legal employment, but the positions she found were far below her professional capabilities and provided insufficient income to maintain her financial stability. The credit card charges that Elena was facing had originated from a sophisticated identity theft scheme that had victimized her along with dozens of other people throughout the New York metropolitan area. The criminal enterprise had obtained personal information through data breaches and used that information to create fraudulent credit cards and identification documents that were then used to make purchases at retail establishments. Elena had been unaware that her identity had been compromised until she was contacted by law enforcement about the fraudulent charges. The investigation had focused on identifying and prosecuting the individuals who had used the stolen cards, rather than the sophisticated criminals who had orchestrated the identity theft scheme. Elena's name had appeared on the fraudulent transactions, making her a target for prosecution despite her status as a victim of the original crime. The complexity of the identity theft scheme and the inadequate investigation that had led to Elena's charges represented exactly the kind of legal challenge that her military experience had prepared her to handle. Her years of experience investigating complex criminal enterprises in military settings had given her the analytical skills and legal knowledge necessary to identify the flaws in the prosecution's case and mount an effective defense. Elena's decision to represent herself wasn't born of confidence or stubbornness. It was the result of a professional assessment that her court-appointed attorney lacked the skills, time, and motivation necessary to properly investigate and defend against charges that she believed could be successfully challenged with adequate preparation and legal expertise. As the trial began, Elena's approach to her defense started to reveal levels of legal sophistication that surprised everyone in the courtroom. Her opening statement was concise, well-organized, and delivered with the confidence of someone who had extensive experience addressing judges and juries. She outlined a defense strategy that challenged not just the specific evidence against her, but the entire investigation that had led to her prosecution. Elena's cross-examination of the prosecution's witnesses was methodical and devastatingly effective. She challenged the store employee's ability to identify her from security footage, questioned the chain of custody for physical evidence, and exposed gaps in the investigation that her court-appointed attorney had completely missed. Her questions were precisely crafted to elicit specific information, and her follow-up questions demonstrated comprehensive understanding of evidence law and procedure. Her objections to evidence were precisely timed and legally sound, often citing specific case law and procedural rules that surprised both the prosecution and the judge. Elena's understanding of criminal procedure exceeded what most defendants could demonstrate, and her courtroom demeanor suggested extensive experience with legal proceedings at the highest levels. Elena challenged the prosecution's evidence with surgical precision, identifying weaknesses in the investigation that had led to her wrongful charges. She demonstrated that the security footage was insufficient to definitively identify her, that the witness statements were unreliable, and that the physical evidence had been improperly collected and preserved. Her analysis of the prosecution's case was comprehensive and professionally presented. Judge Harrison found himself increasingly intrigued by Elena's defense strategy and obvious legal expertise. Her knowledge of evidence law and criminal procedure was clearly professional level, and her courtroom demeanor suggested extensive experience with legal proceedings. She handled objections, procedural motions, and witness examination with skills that many practicing attorneys would have envied. The prosecution, initially confident in their case against what they assumed was an unsophisticated defendant, found themselves facing unexpectedly skilled opposition. Elena's defense was systematic, comprehensive, and based on legal strategies that required advanced understanding of criminal law and courtroom procedure. Assistant District Attorney Chen began to realize that he was facing someone with legal training and experience that he had not anticipated. Elena's presentation of her defense included detailed analysis of the identity theft scheme that had victimized her, supported by evidence that she had gathered independently of the official investigation. Her research into the criminal enterprise was thorough and professional, utilizing investigative techniques that she had learned during her military service. She had identified patterns of criminal activity, traced financial transactions, and developed a comprehensive understanding of how the scheme had operated. Her defense included expert testimony about identity theft procedures, analysis of financial records that supported her claims of victimization, and documentation of her legitimate whereabouts during the times when the fraudulent purchases had been made. Elena's preparation was exhaustive and professional, demonstrating investigative skills that exceeded what typical defendants could access or afford. As the trial progressed through its second day, the temperature in the courtroom began to rise due to unseasonably warm weather and the building's aging climate control system. Judge Harrison, concerned about the comfort of everyone present, suggested that attorneys and participants might want to remove jackets or adjust their clothing for comfort during the proceedings. Elena had been wearing a conservative business blazer throughout the trial, maintaining the professional appearance that she felt was appropriate for court proceedings. When Judge Harrison made his suggestion about removing jackets, Elena hesitated briefly before complying with what she understood to be the judge's instruction. The moment Elena removed her jacket, everything in the courtroom changed. The tattoo on her left forearm was immediately visible and instantly recognizable to anyone familiar with military law and service. The image was professionally done and clearly meaningful. The Judge Advocate General Corps insignia, a balanced scale of justice superimposed over a sword, accompanied by the Corps motto, "Justice under arms," in elegant script lettering. Surrounding the central JAG Corps insignia were military service ribbons and deployment indicators that told the story of Elena's military career to anyone who knew how to read them. Combat deployment ribbons from Iraq and Afghanistan, military justice ribbons indicating specialized training and service, and unit citations that marked her as someone who had served with distinction in challenging circumstances. Judge Harrison stared at the tattoo in stunned recognition and growing understanding. He had served as a military attorney himself before transitioning to civilian practice and eventual appointment to the bench. His own military legal experience had given him immediate recognition of what Elena's tattoo represented. She was not just any defendant, but a fellow military attorney with extensive experience in exactly the kind of legal proceedings they were currently conducting. The courtroom fell into complete silence as Judge Harrison processed the implications of Elena's revealed identity. Court staff, attorneys, and observers all recognized that something significant had just occurred, even if they didn't fully understand the meaning of what they were seeing. The professional atmosphere in the courtroom shifted as everyone began to realize that their assumptions about Elena Rodriguez had been fundamentally wrong. Elena's tattoo told a story of professional achievement and dedicated service that completely contradicted the prosecution's characterization of her as a desperate woman who had turned to crime out of financial necessity. The JAG Corps insignia and combat deployment indicators marked her as someone who had served with distinction in some of the most challenging legal environments in the world. Judge Harrison's recognition of Elena's professional credentials was immediate and profound. The symbols on her arm indicated that she had not only served as a military attorney, but had done so at the highest levels of responsibility and in the most demanding circumstances. The combat deployment ribbons meant that she had provided legal services in war zones, dealing with life-and-death legal issues under conditions that few civilian attorneys ever experienced. The presence of multiple deployment ribbons and specialized military justice indicators told Judge Harrison that Elena had been far more than a routine military attorney. She had been a senior JAG officer with extensive experience in criminal law, military justice, and legal proceedings in combat zones. Her qualifications and experience exceeded those of most civilian attorneys, including many who practiced in the very courtroom where she was now defending herself. Elena's military service record, once revealed through her tattoo, painted a picture of exceptional professional achievement and personal integrity. She had served as defense counsel in high-profile military criminal cases, prosecuted war crimes, and provided legal counsel to commanders making critical decisions in combat zones. Her expertise in criminal law exceeded that of most civilian attorneys, and her courtroom experience included some of the most challenging legal proceedings in military history. The prosecution's case, which had seemed straightforward against an unemployed defendant, suddenly appeared much more complex when viewed through the lens of Elena's professional background. Her challenges to evidence and procedure were not the desperate attempts of someone trying to avoid consequences, but the professional assessments of an experienced attorney who had identified genuine weaknesses in the prosecution's case. Judge Harrison called for an immediate recess to consider the implications of Elena's revealed identity and to allow everyone in the courtroom to process what they had just learned. The presence of a retired JAG officer as defendant raised serious questions about the quality of the investigation, the appropriateness of the charges, and the possibility that Elena was indeed a victim of identity theft rather than a perpetrator of credit card fraud. During the recess, Elena's military record was quickly researched and verified through official channels. The information confirmed what her tattoo had already revealed. She was a retired Army JAG officer with an exemplary service record, multiple commendations for integrity and professionalism, and extensive experience in military criminal law. Her financial difficulties, while real, were the result of the challenges many veterans faced in transitioning to civilian careers, rather than indicators of criminal intent. Elena's service record included specific commendations for her integrity, professionalism, and dedication to justice that made it extremely difficult to believe she would have committed the crimes she was charged with. Her military evaluations consistently praised her ethical standards, legal expertise, and commitment to upholding the highest standards of military justice. When court reconvened, Judge Harrison addressed Elena directly, acknowledging her military service and legal background with the respect that one legal professional accords to another. His recognition of her professional credentials fundamentally transformed the dynamic of the trial, as the court now understood that they were dealing with a colleague rather than a typical criminal defendant. Elena's response to Judge Harrison's recognition was characterized by the same professionalism and dignity that had marked her military service. She acknowledged her background without seeking to use it as a shield against the charges, but rather as context for understanding her circumstances and the flaws in the investigation that had led to her prosecution. The prosecution found themselves in an increasingly difficult position as they realized that their case was now being evaluated by someone with professional expertise equal to their own. Elena's challenges to their case were no longer the efforts of a desperate defendant, but the professional analysis of an experienced attorney who had identified legitimate problems with their investigation and evidence. Elena's defense strategy became more comprehensive and aggressive as she no longer needed to conceal her legal expertise. She presented a detailed analysis of the identity theft scheme that had victimized her, demonstrated significant flaws in the investigation that had led to her wrongful charges, and argued for dismissal based on prosecutorial misconduct and insufficient evidence. Her presentation to the court was methodical and devastating. Elena demonstrated that the investigation had been superficial and inadequate, focusing on prosecuting the victims of identity theft rather than the sophisticated criminals who had orchestrated the scheme. She showed that the evidence against her was circumstantial at best, and that the prosecution had failed to conduct even basic investigation into the criminal enterprise that had created the fraudulent credit cards. Elena's military experience in investigating complex criminal enterprises had given her the analytical skills necessary to understand how the identity theft scheme had operated and how her identity had been compromised. Her presentation included detailed analysis of the criminal network, evidence of her legitimate activities during the times when fraudulent purchases were made, and documentation of her efforts to report and resolve the identity theft when she first became aware of it. The case against Elena Rodriguez began to unravel completely under the scrutiny of her professional defense. Her military service record, financial history, and character references painted a picture of someone who was far more likely to be a victim of sophisticated criminal enterprise than a perpetrator of petty credit card fraud. Judge Harrison, recognizing both Elena's professional credentials and the fundamental weakness of the prosecution's case, began to seriously consider whether justice would be better served by dismissing the charges than by continuing a prosecution that appeared to be based on flawed investigation and mistaken assumptions about the defendant's background and circumstances. The revelation of Elena's military legal background had transformed what should have been a routine criminal case into a professional embarrassment for the prosecution and a demonstration of how veterans with specialized skills could be failed by systems that didn't recognize their expertise or understand their circumstances. The charges against Elena Rodriguez were eventually dismissed with prejudice, meaning that they could not be refiled. Judge Harrison's dismissal order included specific criticism of the investigation that had led to the charges and recommendations for better procedures in handling cases involving identity theft and military veterans. Elena's case had lasting impact on how the criminal justice system approached cases involving military veterans with specialized professional backgrounds. Her professional defense had demonstrated that assumptions about defendants based on their apparent circumstances could be dangerously wrong, and that military experience could provide skills and perspectives that civilian legal systems needed to recognize and respect. Elena's return to legal practice was facilitated by the publicity surrounding her case and the recognition of her professional capabilities that had been demonstrated in court. She established a practice specializing in veterans' legal issues and criminal defense, using her unique combination of military and civilian legal experience to help other veterans navigate the complex transition from military to civilian life. The judge who had recognized Elena's tattoo became a strong advocate for veterans' legal rights and worked to establish programs that would help military attorneys transition their skills to civilian practice. Elena's story spread throughout the legal community as a powerful example of hidden expertise and the importance of looking beyond surface appearances when evaluating defendants and their circumstances. Years later, Elena would reflect on the moment when removing her jacket had changed everything. The tattoo that revealed her identity had been intended as a private reminder of her military service and legal career, but it had become the key to demonstrating her innocence and returning to the legal profession she loved. The JAG Corps motto, "Justice Under Arms," had taken on new meaning for Elena in civilian life. She no longer served in uniform, but her commitment to justice and her professional skills continued to protect people who needed legal representation and advocacy. Her tattoo had been a symbol of her past service, but it had become the foundation for a new career dedicated to the same principles of justice and integrity that had guided her military service. Elena Rodriguez proved that military legal training could be successfully adapted to civilian practice, that veteran skills and experience deserved recognition and respect, and that the pursuit of justice didn't end with military retirement. The courtroom moment when her jacket came off had revealed not just a tattoo, but a professional identity that had been hidden by circumstances and assumptions, reminding everyone present that expertise and dedication could be found in unexpected places.